Hi folks, welcome to my 8-Bit Retro Journal. So this is the the fourth part of my celebration of the Macintosh during Marcintosh, and so this is the final video in my sequence of 4 videos. Today I'm just going to sort of wrap up and look a little bit at CPU doublers code, which I did a video on last week, and then look at a couple other small things. None of them really well, CPU double, obviously, there was a connection with the QL because of the idea I got. But the other things, they're not. So it's just pure Mac. I will say it was refreshing to revisit the Mac, having sort of left it for almost 20 years. If I look at all my computers, I have very fond nostalgia for the ZX81, my very first computer, also the TRS-80 pocket computer, which I've shown on my channel, which I've also fixed, and I had it around at the same time as this. And then my other computer after school that I got was the Sinclair QL. So I have really fond memories of those two. I also have a Z88, which I haven't shown yet, and I haven't really done too much of that, so I don't know how much nostalgia I have for that because I never used it that much. But the ZX81, the TRS-80 pocket computer, and the QL I used a lot. But I will also add my Mac 2SI to that because I actually did some hardware hacks on that, and which was a lot of fun. You could replace the crystal with a faster one and get a slightly faster improvement. And it was really the last time that I probably opened up a computer to modify it. And so I would group my Mac 2SI, which I owned from the early 90s to 2000 probably, or even maybe actually it's probably past that. It's probably 2002. So I probably had it for almost 10 years. And after that, I kind of lose interest in that. I think I had a Toshiba laptop, and then I had which I don't have anymore, and then I had an IBM ThinkPad laptop, which replaced that. And I still have that, and it's kind of nice, but I never really opened it up and fiddled with it. And it's all surface mount, small circuit board for a laptop. I mean, it's not a very powerful laptop. It's 40 megabytes of memory in Windows 98, but still, it's not. I'm not as nostalgic about that because I owned it for a short time, and then I moved up to a Dell Inspiron, which then I've had a whole bunch of those, and now I'm using my iMac and my MacBook, but mostly the iMac I'm using for Windows. So I kind of lost that connection to this is a computer that I want to take apart. And I will say that the Mac 2SI actually fit that bill. So I'm really glad that we celebrated the old school Macs because they are really part of that era. A little transition from the 80s to the 90s, but still part of it. I didn't own an 80s Mac. But the 90s Macs was really a transition from these old machines to these new machines. And I will say that it was a stark difference. I mean, they could do a whole lot more. And but what I've discovered is that I have absolutely no remnant of that whatsoever. I was looking, and I'm like, I must have something, maybe an old mouse or something. I got rid of everything probably in 2002 or 3 when I sold it, and I remember actually making the drive out to the person to sell it to because they got the Mac 2SI and my laser printer all at the same time, and I was kind of downscaling. So the things I have left of the Mac experiences, I've got this Macworld mouse pad that I got probably at a Macworld that I went to. I've got this, which I got at Micro Center. It's a CD drive, but it had an extension. It had an extension to it where you put another pack here, and then that would give you SCSI interface you could hook to your Mac. And so this could become a CD reader. And for the life of me, I thought I kept the pack, but I guess I got rid of it because I cannot find it. And so now all I have is a portable CD drive, which I kept, and it takes batteries and whatnot. But no longer do I have even the CD reader capabilities. But besides my own packaged software, I found this Go Master. Remember, I bought this in New York, I think, visiting somebody. So that's it says Macintosh 800K floppy system 6.02. I have this, make sure everything's in focus. I have this famous book called "The Mac Is Not a Typewriter" that talks about how to use fonts and in documents. And then finally, the only magazine that I kept, and my products were reviewed in Macworld and Mac User. I actually still have the clippings, but I didn't keep the magazines. They were just, it wasn't that many, but they also had Mac Week, which was this big one, thin but big, and I just didn't want to keep them all, so I just took out the actual clippings and got rid of them. But I kept this one because it was from Germany, and this one actually came out in '96, and it actually so this was sent to me by, I don't know who must have sent it to me. Maybe I didn't have a distributor in Germany, but you can see that it talks about in 1996 CPU 1.0. And I think CPU 1.0 came out in 95, so this was, you can see the copyright is 1995. So so I have this Mac Welt, which is the German version of Mac World left. But other than that, I don't, unfortunately, I don't have much of anything else and left from the Mac. I do have still a Newton that's in pieces, but that's not really a Macintosh. It's around the same era. But that's all that sort of has survived the purge for me on Macintosh. So it's a little sad because, and to be honest, I was thinking like, maybe I should try to acquire one, and perhaps one of the old MacBooks. But that might be the right form factor. But I think the one problem with the Macs is that they're still viable now. In fact, I own an iMac, 2011, which is getting old, long in the tooth, but still, it's i5, Core i5. I can never remember how to say the modern processor names. I think it has four or 8 cores and 8 gigs of memory, running Windows 7. So it's a little bit like, because I own a modern version and I have a MacBook as well. I showed them both on my channel. But so a little bit of nostalgia that, and that's why if you watch Adrian's Digital Basement, he sort of does that. And it's kind of nice to watch. The other thing that sort of came up as I was doing this, it was a little sad, and I wanted to kind of mention this before I go. I'm going to go on the emulator again and show you some of the other things I did. It's not going to take that long. Was that, Don Crabb did the review of my stuff. I showed you that book when I did Cron Manager, and I didn't realize that he passed away at a pretty early age in 2000, which is sad. Because he was definitely one of those icons that wrote a lot about the Mac back then. And of course, if you saw one of my earlier videos, or if you watch any of my earlier videos on the QL, I did some Tim Hartnell stuff, like his chess program against the ZX81's 1K chess, and he passed away in 1991. And so, in my journey through computing, Tim Hartnell was sort of that first iconic figure, because I remember going and buying some of his basic books and typing them into my QL, whether they were specifically for the Sinclair QL, which I have the 51 games for the Sinclair QL. For the ZX81, not the Sinclair QL. I do have a AI for the Sinclair QL from Tim Hartnell. I also have the big computer games that he wrote. He was iconic, and when I did that video, I never realized that he had passed away in 1991 of cancer. And unfortunately, Don Crabb also passed away of, I think, pancreatic cancer. I did some searching, and luckily, another figure that I did follow at one point was John Dvorak, John C. Dvorak, who wrote columns in, I think, Byte magazine, and so I enjoyed it. So he's still around and kicking, and doing stuff. So that's nice to know. But it's sad that we lost some of these authors, and lost them a long time ago, and I actually lost touch with that. As we moved further. And I think that's one reason that, I like sort of playing with these old computers. It kind of brings you back to a different time. Still, learning technical things, but they were a bit more primitive. You had to create your own serial. It wasn't as easy as plugging in a USB cable and getting an auto-loaded driver. You had to do a lot of work. And even before that, then, in this world where you didn't even have that. I think that's what we love. That's why I love watching those videos from my favorite YouTubers reminiscing, even though sometimes they talk about the Amiga or even the Commodore 64, which I've never had, but you can kind of relate to that in those times. So in any case, I thought I'd share that with you guys. But no more Macs in my repertoire. Just this is all I got. So it's a little sad that I got rid of it, but it'd be hard to store it. But maybe if I come across an old MacBook, one of those really gray-looking boxes, maybe I'll purchase that just to have it. let's go to the emulator to show you briefly a few things that I did after CPU doubler. All right, so let's do that. All right, I'm back on the Mini VMAC emulator, and what I wanted to do is briefly show you a little bit of the CPU doubler code, and then I also wanted to talk about these two applications, one of them which I never got working, and one of them which I did, and released as shareware. But let's go first. And so, by the way, CC is CPU charger, and all that is CPU doubler without the control panel. So basically, CPU doubler was a combination of a control panel and the init. If you saw my Crime Manager video, you saw that a Crime Manager had a control panel and a init, and then a faceless background application that the init started. You'll see that CPU doubler will have the control panel and then the init, which does the actual work by modifying the kernel. And CPU charger was just the init, so you couldn't, it was just fixed, you couldn't change anything, so you couldn't really actually do any process management. It would just give you the best, so you could unboot it if you wanted to, but you couldn't make any changes otherwise. So that's what the icon here looked. I think if I had released had named CPU doubler CPU charger, I would have kept it as a control panel. What I was trying to do here at this point is this was still towards the end of my company, and I was like, oh, maybe if I release this as a freeware option, people will be more interested in the US. And this was trying to be sort of a viral way of selling it. You could register for $10 using CompuServe. That's pretty old school. To install CPU doubler, there's no interface, so you install CPU charger and restart your Macintosh. There's nothing to do but what CPU optimize. So that's it. Yeah, you couldn't even. I don't think there's a key combinations where you could get out of it. So so this was just a very inexpensive way to get the heart of it, but you couldn't control any of that. It's almost like going back to my CPU doubler video. Remember, before I had the Toolkit 2 installed, I didn't have the jobs command. So the QL was doing multitasking, and you could somehow set priorities, although there was no interface to it. But the QL's operating system, QDOS, had the ability of priorities, but there was no way to get at them. So that's kind of what this is. But I did that after CPU doubler. So anyway, so let's take a quick look at CPU doubler. You can see mostly, if you watch my other videos, this is kind of very similar. So the code is going to be divided into, and let's look at CPU doubler 2.0. So you've got CDEV, that's the control panel. And again, the icon. And there's not too many exciting things here. You're basically just going to have the interface to where, and this is standard stuff that I've just modified from probably an example. So you could initialize, close, and show your system status. So the system status one might be the interesting one. But everything else would set some information and that the init would then utilize to do its job, right? So if I did find show system status, this will probably, I guess it's not going to show system status. You can see that find again. Yeah, so that's where it kind of did its job. Plain text. What the heck will print out all zeros? I don't know what I was talking about. Yes, this might be comical to read. First figure out our ratio. Now we calculate the Manhattan distance. Oh, look, I used the Manhattan distance. Now compute the average weight using variance. Finally, we compute the new ratio. Here we compute Y old and Y new. So yeah, so it did a little bit of some statistical analysis given the state of the system, which this control panel had a hold of, but nothing too much, and the rest is just graphics. So it's nothing too exciting in the control panel. As I said, it's the init is where things happen more, but again, I wouldn't necessarily. So this is probably. So it doesn't have utility.c. I wonder if that's in the. Did I forget to copy it over? CDEV and that. Where is utility.c? Was that so maybe that was a standard something that I just don't shared. Yeah, it's right here. So I just can't find it. Created 295 is pressed. Oh, I see. So this was probably something I put in all my control panels. This is a way to escape. So any control panel I was writing, I was trying to figure out how to get out of it. So there's this kind of, so I tried to have it in a shared folder. For whatever reason, it's not finding it. Probably because I copied this over into this new disk. But so here's the init, and this is where the magic happens. And basically, the thing that I patched was get next event. And I'd forgotten how to do this. Set all global, set resource communication settings, change resource, write resource. So at one point, there's got to be that it's turned off because abort load. Okay, so that would abort load. But there's also a way to turn, they would have to see if it was turned off or not. Because if it were turned off, it would just work normally. Install me, okay. Patch init application, new int application, my init application. So maybe this is this mine? Exclude finder, yeah, so this is definitely finding, if we're, are the threshold, then rebuild process list, okay. I know what the threshold was, setting process list count. So here's where I'm doing my hash, and you can see that I'm loop through the list until we find free slot which will exist. So I did a linear collision resolution. Right, so that's what this does, but my initial hash must have been computed very quickly. Get hash value, that's what this probably does. Where's get hash value? Get hash value, maybe it's at the end. But get hash value, so that was, comment this out since refresh process list kills, this isn't the, what we got here. So this is my, we'll go through this in a second. But somewhere I have this, oh, maybe it looks like it's a define actually. That's probably because it was very simple in terms of what it did. I wonder if it's in the header file somewhere. Oh, there are no header files. So I guess I should try to find it quickly. I don't want to spend too much time whiling my time away here, but so let's see if we can find this. Can I copy this into copy, find, paste, there we go, find. Okay, find again. So I guess I gotta start at the start. But somewhere this resides, and yeah, no, it's got to be in an include. I just know where the include is. Oh, here, shared interfaces utilities. So it's, I bet it's in utilities. Is there a get hash value here? Is press, copy string, null pointer, compare, create, not in, process, refresh, in front. Nope. Is it in? So it's got to be in interfaces. Oh, that was, I'm sorry, that was utility. So utility, well, it could have been utilities.h actually. It was not. Because I think it's going to be define, in range and error, but I hope it's in interfaces. Yeah, here it is. Yeah, so that's all the hash was. The hash mask was with table size of one, so my table size was 128. So I just basically masked off the last 7 bits of that, right? 0, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. So that made a very fast hash. So that was the key of really speeding this up. So I lied. It wasn't a 256-bit table. It was 128 applications you could max out at. I must have tested initially with 6. And so yeah. So let's go back here. So I think at the very end, this is the. So this is basically my get next event that I replaced their get next event, right? And so you can see that I loop forever. And basically the way this worked is on switch, normal mode, custom mode. And I guess there must have been off. So normal mode or custom mode. Because somewhere this has got to tell it that it's being turned off. So maybe it was neither if it was off. I guess let's go back to interfaces. Is there anything that says normal mode, custom mode? Off mode, right. So if it was turned off, it was off mode. So basically, the on switch settings would either get on as normal mode or as custom mode, or off. And if it's off, it would be neither of these case statements, and it would just fall through and do nothing. But then here you would actually make a decision on if it were if we have empty slots. So this do linear no do linear hash search if you have a collision, right? Start hash next. All right. But if it's off, so somewhere I must have replaced something that. So if result equals wait next event. Yeah. So here, if it's custom mode, I must have gone into the list. Right, because I return out of this. That's why. So if I actually did something, I return out of it. That's why if it's neither one of these, it just goes through. And I believe it actually. The point being that I would end up. We would actually call wait next event if it's turned off, right? So it wouldn't not do anything. It would actually call wait next event, and I'm trying to figure out. It would basically just relinquish control back to the original wait next event, and I'm trying to figure out where it did that. Unfortunately, it's been a long time since I looked at this code, and it's not like Windows, so you can only size them from here. But so here you get next. So I think what's going on is you get next event, and if it's one of these modes, then you alter its behavior. Otherwise, you just let it work its magic the way the Mac folks thought it should behave. So in other words, if you do nothing, then get next event works as before. So I think that's how this is designed. So in other words, if it's neither one of these switches, then you are not changing its behavior within this or this. And again, I don't want to spend hours trying to go through this code. But anyway, so that was how I basically patched get next event so that it would, instead of just, so I didn't completely replace it, I just augmented it, right? So the original get next event still exists, and I would manipulate how it worked based on if they were, so if these cases were true, then I would kind of step in, and you can see I'm actually calling wait next event, which I think get next event may have called. So I would have stepped in and paused, so which kind of then creates a recursion if you think about it, and eventually return the result. So I would kind of step in and dole out a next event to a different process than what get next event was about to do. I think that's how I did it, and that's why I don't have the off mode that just says call wait next event, because I think if you don't call anything, the get next event gets run. All right, and this is a loop that runs forever. So yeah, so it wasn't, as I said, it wasn't a huge piece of code. You just had to sort of, again, the process IDs were important because Macintosh processes didn't have process IDs. They basically just had some information, and one of those pieces of information was the timestamp of when they were started, which was some number from the clock cycles of how long the computer was running, and that was a large number that was pretty unique, and so I used that. So when I saved information about a process and its settings within CPU doubler, I could use that ID, since when you grab a process from the actual Mac kernel, it would have that number associated with it, and then I could use that as my hash value in my ID. So I had to figure out a way to mark that. Okay, that's CPU doubler 2.0. 2.1 is no different. But yeah, so the other thing, I don't want to spend too much time on this. The other thing I wanted to show you was AI. This was an interesting little application. It's called Alias It. And what Alias It did is it had System 7, System 8. It was a little utility that, if I duplicate that? So I believe the way it worked is if you took two applications and you, I forget how you do. Let me just, I don't have the right. So if you took two applications and you dragged them over here, Alias It would create a file that was basically like an alias, except the difference was, if I close this, if I double click Alias It, it starts both of them up. So it was like a multi-alias. And I always wanted to do this. And that's it. That's all it did. It was a very simple little app that you could have multiple things. So this machine's running at 4 times the speed now. That's why this globe is running actually faster than before. But you could basically just drag and drop a bunch of things in, and it would create this alias file. Right, so I could, if I wanted to, I could say, okay, let me drag, and I believe, so let me see if can you do one at a time. So Alias It, and then drag this in, and it would just add to it. You drag this in, and it would add to it. So now Alias It will open up. You can see it's going to open up all three. Yeah, it's a 3-to-1 mapping. So imagine if you on modern Windows, if you had a shortcut that could open up multiple things. So I should investigate whether that exists or not. But yeah, so this was a little, I think it was freeware utility. Well, I think I sold everything to shareware with, yeah, $5 registration. I don't think I ever got anything from that. Most people would be like, oh, thanks, yeah, I'll send it in. But that's okay, because I do the same thing, right? So I'm guilty of not always paying shareware authors their due, and I feel bad about that. It's just not something I'm in the habit of. But when I own my own company and I did that, I don't think one person ever sent me anything, and I'm fine with that. It was just, if somebody wanted to, that was great. I did it because I enjoyed doing this. So I did write a System 8 version, which was slightly different than System 7. And you can install it. So that was Alias It. So that was probably the last application that I wrote. And what you would do is, at one point, you'd rename this to Open3. And then if you wanted to do another one, right, Alias It always created the Alias It alias thing. But so it was like an alias, which is like a shortcut. So again, you can have make alias, which will create an alias, right? So when you do that, it'll open it up. But again, Alias It allowed you to do 3 things. And yeah, and it was pretty simple. It just basically created a file where it kept the locations, and then it just, I mean, it was the simplest thing to write. It literally just it called Apple Events Open. That's it. So it basically looked at so it had the drag and drop feature of aliasing it and then launching the document. It would just get the information that was in the alias thing. I don't know if you can actually file open. Can I actually desktop? Yeah, unfortunately, there would be a way to open this, but it's not designated as a text file, so you can't. But I think with Alias, you can start it too, and then you can just say, no, it was literally a pure drag and drop application, so you couldn't even use it that way. That's funny. All right, so that was my last application that I wrote, and I just sold it as shareware. The other one that I was thinking of writing, and I created, usually when I created these things, except for Cron Manager, Climate, I usually created the icon first because that got me excited. So ER was going to be called Elastic RAM Disk, and the idea there was the Mac had, the QL had this. It had a dynamic RAM disk where you create a RAM disk on the QL, and it takes 0 bytes until you copied something in there, and it would take as many bytes as the thing took. So you didn't have to set aside memory that was valuable. And so if you look at ER, that was my icon for the Elastic RAM disk. So this is just basically going to be a RAM disk that when you created it on the desktop, it would have 0 bytes. And when you copy stuff in, it would just take up more bytes. And I was going to implement this using some sort of link mechanism scheme, but I never got far with it. So I don't think so I guess there was going to be an application to that. I hadn't really thought through this yet, but I don't think I ever got it to actually do anything. So I doubt that there's, this is just the generic faceless background application one. That's probably how I did most of mine. So I found an FBA one, so that's not even, is this the generic RAM in it, right? So I did try to start this up at least. Yeah, so this is Mac developer support, right? This is not even my comments. And so I just probably wanted to see if I can get it to start, but it never did anything. Orchard created for you. Yeah, so this is just mostly header stuff, but nothing special. And I hadn't sort of figured out yet how I wanted to store the memory. It's probably going to be some linked list of blocks of a certain size, and that would chain together. And I had to figure out then how to do driver level stuff, which I just ran out of time, I suppose. I never really did much of it. But anyway, that was the last one I did. Other ones that I kind of thought, I think Disk Police was another one that was going to kind of go through and clean up your hard disk, but I never really seriously thought about that. It was just, I think what AR was, nothing. I don't know. So Archiver maybe, MK, no icons. I have no idea what it is. EC, no idea. Oh, that's my encryption program, I think. I showed that to you in BASIC, but I think this is a little program that file encrypts. Yeah, so that's just the C version of that. And I wrote that originally in the QO as well. Anyway, those were my Mac days. Launching event tracker. Yeah, so this is just probably test programs to launch and stuff. But those were my Mac days. I had a lot of fun doing it. I learned a lot. I made some money, I won't lie. The CPU is very successful in the European market. But except for Alias It, a lot of these ideas came from the QO, which was this, considered unsuccessful computer in the, from the, let me just open through it, from the mid 80s, right? And just goes to show you that every computer has some things in it that you can find value in. And the QO was a very sophisticated machine. And I do want to do a series on the notes of Tony Tebbe, the developer, that he did a whole series in, I think, QO World, when he talked about creating QDOS and everything, the ins and outs of it. I think it was called Dome OS for a while. And how they, Sinclair and his company wanted to create what was called a workable Unix at the time, because Unix could run on the VAX because it was resource intensive. And this is before Linus Torvalds created Linux that is now prevalent everywhere, and you can find on a small SD card, right? I have this Wi-Fi SD card that has Linux kernel running on it. So in any case, that's it for my Marcintosh. I'm going to get back to normal QL things and ZX81 things and TRS-80 things and other things. I have a ZX Spectrum that I need to open up and play with. I have a Raspberry Pi 400 that I got for Christmas that I need to play with. But I really was excited to do this Marcintosh to pay tribute to the Macs of the 80s and 90s, and I'd forgotten how much I enjoyed those machines. So thanks for joining me, and I hope you enjoyed this series. Please feel free to leave comments. Again, if you want to email me privately, if you go to the About page, go to the ZX Simulator link. At the end of that, there is my email. I should probably make it more readily available, but you can find it and email me there, and I will respond to you. I'd love to have more conversations about these. All right. So thanks. Stay safe, and I'll see you in my next video.